sit by the back door after you've offered them to go out. You can settle down, darling.
Hi, right, here we go. How are we doing? Right, got it. We're on. Hi, Dawn.
Hello.
Good to see you. Thank you for joining us in the group today. I'm just gonna get my other phone up here so I can make sure that we're in there. That's great. Good. Oh, hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm very excited to be here. This is the first time I've ever done a live thing.
Oh, well, thank you for doing it for us in the group. And we've known each other for a while, and I've always really loved your outlook and your approach, and I'm really excited to have the chance to share some of that vision and passion with the group members today. Just to kind of start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself, Dawn, about what you do and your business.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So yeah, pleasure to be here. Great to have this opportunity. So big thank you. So I am a pet dog guardian, caregiver of 3 dogs that I cohabit with, and I am also a professional. So I work with dogs that have behaviours that are labelled as aggressive or reactive, and I set my business up for Positive Paws about 12 years ago now. Time's flown by, lots and lots of things have changed. Learning journey is continuous, and yeah, met lots of different people from different backgrounds with their dogs. So yeah, so basically that's a bit of a whistle stop tour of me. I'm a caregiver with three sensitive dogs with individual needs, and for Positive Paws was born out really of my first experience with a dog that was labelled as reactive, and that took me on several different paths before I found the one that I'm on now. It started off quite traditional really, and the more I sort of felt differently about things, the more I explored, until I eventually found Sheila Harper. Did a short course on social skills and communication, I think it was, and yeah, I didn't have a clue. I was introduced to a harness and a longer length lead. My dogs were wearing sort of big, thick leather studded collars, short chain type leads. This was about, yeah, gosh, 15 years ago, I think. So I'm just so forever grateful, really, and gratitude that I met Sheila, and I stuck with that learning that teased out the good stuff and the things I didn't agree with, things that I got cross about, things I got frustrated with. I didn't have the easiest of dogs, and I did end up having the best quality of life with my dogs, but also one of the first things that I became aware of was my behaviour and how that was affecting the dogs. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
So anybody, if you look on the YouTube, the Dog Centre Care YouTube channel, or just search for Sheila Harper in the group, you'll see the Facebook Live we did with Sheila, and it's really worth listening to. So how did you come across Sheila then? And were you already on a bit of a journey then of thinking, right, some of this traditional stuff doesn't quite sit right with me and I need to find something more? Or did you kind of stumble across Sheila and then that shifted your outlook?
That's a really good question. I have senior moments with my memory these days, so we're going back a bit, but I think from what I remember, I knew nothing at all. Like I got a pup. The first puppy I got, I wanted a dog, wanted to walk a dog, wanted to cuddle with a dog, and saw I don't even know, saw in a paper somewhere, because this is before social media, and I got on a bus. I was 15, got on a bus, and I saw some gorgeous German Shepherd cross puppies, gave the lady 50 quid, put the dog in a great big canvas hold all, and got on a bus and came home with the dog. And at that time, in the present moment, I can still relate to how that felt. Like, I felt fine. I mean, my mum was tearing her hair out. My sister was allowed to get a kitten at the same time. So the dog kept throwing the kitten around. It was quite chaotic. And that didn't unfortunately end very well. I think my mum took the dog to a rescue place without telling me. So I thought the dog had run away. So I spent a long time trying to find that dog. And the reason I share that story is because that's often what our pet caregivers are experiencing. There's no fear necessarily. There's just this lovely puppy. The reason, I'm digressing slightly, but the reason, so I got Brandy, and I was told I had to go to like clicker training. And again, I'm not being disrespectful or criticising or judging any form of training. But for me, that experience just didn't make any sense. That I was the only one in the class. So we were going around an empty hall and I was clicking my dog when she sat. And that didn't seem to make sense to me. Then I went and thought I wanted to be social. So I joined a group and a class, but it was quite instructor-led, and the instructor was asking me to make my dog sit at the far end of the hall and then call her back, and he yelled at her. And she was an extremely shut down, nervous dog. And so she was terrified. So I left there. So Ruby's, just a warning, Ruby might have us say hello in a moment. Someone's outside. Then I read some books, and I got into the sort of dog listening type arena, and I had a mix of emotions with that. And again, I didn't understand, and I felt very confused. And then I did stumble across Sheila, and Sheila's in this, hang on a second, right, thank you. Sheila is in Staffordshire, but I'm in West Sussex, and there was something that came up with Sheila Harper doing something in Crowborough in West Sussex. And I think it caught my eye because it was social skills, and it sounded nice and calm and relaxed. Excuse me. So yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, to be quite honest. I walked in, I was anxious, and I was not knowing what was going to be expected of me. Obviously I didn't know Sheila at all, and we started talking. So we did stuff in the hall about body language, communication, and stress. Now I was previously a teacher of humans, so not a teacher, a trainer. I used to do practical training. So for me, that resonated on the human side of things. But I think with a lot of us, we can be really impatient with what we want to know and understand. So I was introduced to the harness and a long lead, a bit about social skills, body language that I was trying to interpret instead of just observing, way off expectations from what I was going to achieve it was a weekend, a Saturday and a Sunday. And I, for some reason, thought if I put a longer lead on and a harness that my dog would miraculously stop pulling. Sheila was very, very, very calm and patient, no judgment. And that I'm really grateful for because I it's frustrating to think, oh, what is she doing with that lead? And so, yeah, so yes, I did stumble across Sheila. She came to West Sussex. And then I think I've done almost every short course that Sheila's done. And I've also done IPACS 1 and IPACS 2. It was called something else before. Obviously, I've learned from other people as well. But fundamentally, it was that ethos of that human canine connection and being dog-centered that resonated with me. And the results I got with my Bull Mastiff Cross Rossi, Benson, he was about 60 kilos, pulled like a train. I threw my toys out the pram saying it was rubbish, it didn't work, and it was just a long lead, and he was still pulling. But I stuck with it. And he was an absolute delight to work with and walk. So it does work if we work it.
I want us to talk about that in a moment, actually, because I think that'd be really helpful for some caregivers, because we can both share our thoughts on pulling and approaches. But before that, I think it's really interesting how many people I speak to, professionals and caregivers, who we find our way through into thinking about things a little bit differently. Not because there's anything wrong with some of the other stuff. It's just that that dog in front of us is telling us, hang on, you need to listen to me first. Yeah. Because I can't do any of that stuff until you work me out first. And that's a big wake-up call. And I had it with Milo, my kind of soul dog. He's not with us now, sadly, but when Milo came along, he was like, yeah, well, that's all very well and done, but you know, this is my truth, and you need to find out what it is, because all that other stuff just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, I think from a professional perspective as well, teachings can often seem to be an easy thing to do, and learning sometimes probably not so much so. But I find that we're working as a whole. You know, we're working with the dog and the human, and I think it's very tough at the moment for dogs living in our domesticated lives, which have become a lot more challenging just in terms of things like slippery floors, you know, air scented air fresheners, the chaos that is our enriched lives these days. I think that it's very difficult for the caregivers because they didn't ask or sign up for a dog that isn't the what dog they wanted. They've got a wonky dog, and they'll reach out on social media, they'll speak to people that give their opinions based on their own limited experience of their own dog. And for the professional, we're often called in when things, you know, have really reached sort of breaking point, really. So it's a big ask, I think, for everybody from all those perspectives, and where we start to, for me, it makes sense to start to unpick and unpack the dog in front of us. But equally, we need to understand someone's expectations, their why, and what they want. I was just bouncing around a little bit, the "why can't you cure my dog" post that I put up had something like a reach of 1,600 people. So I knew that resonated, because we compare ourselves. So I've got my puppy, or I've got my rescue dog, and it's not working out quite as I had planned. Highly stressful. We can then often defend our decision that it's the right decision to have the dog, and the family conflict. Then we call in a professional, and we're trying to manage the expectations, the dog in front of us, and weave our way through a best case scenario. And I think that is a big ask for everybody.
It is, and I think I'm just writing a piece at the moment about truth. About being truthful, and I think as professionals we can easily not be. I think you know, we can't sugarcoat, in my opinion. We have to be truthful about what once we've learned from the dog and we see what's going on, and this is why the approach that you and I and many others follow, which is trying to connect caregiver and dog through that emotional experience, can be really helpful, because we know that you know, I've not met anybody that I've worked with who doesn't care and love for their dog. They feel there's something that needs to be fixed. They see TV shows that kind of show this notion that somehow if you do this and you do this, your dog will do this. And actually that's a lot of work, and for some dogs it's an unrealistic expectation, even if a certain kind of training plan might be justified. Is the caregiver going to be able to follow that and invest in that? Whereas I found almost exclusively, when you get people, by starting off by listening to their emotional story first, I think that's always a good place to start, and then connecting that through their dog and getting them to be more care aware.
I like that, Andy. You've got such a way with words. You come up with these really brilliant little nuggets of phrases.
Okay, well, that's good. Thank you. But it's true though, and this is what you do so well. I love what you do with you know, you you can talk about it, about how you look at making that connection through, and how, because you use the really great terminology there about this thing about navigating through all this, because it's quite tough. There's so many things when we turn up at that person's house or kind of step into that person's life. There's so many other things that are going on regarding that dynamic within the family, within the home, within the environment, people's past expectations, their outlook, all these kind of things come into the mix. One of the things I say to my clients a lot is, once we've talked about things from their point of view, then I say, right, let's ask the dog now. Let's just speak to the dog for a bit. And then how do you do that? And then we can show them through observations. And I think you've had a big influence from Sheila Harper. I've had a big influence from people like Sarah Fisher, where we've really learned about being present to those kind of moments.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, and it's also frustrating. It's challenging. It's wonderful when it works really well, and no two cases are the same. And I think that, you know, I think we need to give ourselves credit as well. Whatever we're doing is how we navigate that ourselves and look after ourselves. And I think that because families are so different, and dogs, I mean, I always say to people, I've got 3 dogs, they have 3 different types of play styles, 3 different styles of walks that they prefer. It'd be so much easier to try and train them to walk how I want them to, and I would take all 3 of them out together and tick them off, saying, well, that's all I can fit in. And that's not to judge people that try and do that, but I think the bigger picture is looking at what's going on, what's the why. You know, why is the dog behaving the way they are? Why does that feel the way it does to the caregiver? What is going on for the family, or if it's a single person? We've also got to be mindful that we're not counsellors. We don't want to open a Pandora's box. We need to be equipped for the curveballs that sometimes come out. You know, I'm sure we've all experienced someone who's been in floods of tears or angry, frustrated, the whole sort of tranche of different emotions. And that's a lot for us to take on our shoulders. So I think it's about, and that we've spoke, I think before we came on live, about reflecting. And so reflecting after each case or each session or each questionnaire, I find really useful, because, and to question and be curious, you know, was that the best I could do? Could I have done it better differently? And I ask my clients to ask themselves those questions as well. But we have to, this again, my personal opinion and the experience that I have is how we communicate. So what's the most single important thing that can give us that indication? And it's similar with the dogs, is to look what's going on. So reading a human's body language, the language that they use, the words, we can really pick up a lot if we actively listen and don't panic about trying to think, right, oh gosh, how am I going to solve that one? How am I going to come up with an answer for that? How am I going to break that news to them? Is try to take a breather and just actively listen to those words and what's being said, and feeling as comfortable as we can to know that it is a journey. We're not going to come up with, right, well, if you can't get your dog off the sofa, this is what you need to do. We need to look at the whole picture, and that's how I work. So I love looking at, you know, the sleep, the connection, the communication, the relationship, looking at the type of exercise and play, because sometimes we can make a small adjustment that makes a massive difference to the dog and the caregiver. So it really is, in terms of the active listening, we can look at what's going on for the family, we can look at what's going on for the dog as well. So I think I'm just rambling a little bit now.
No, it's really interesting.
That makes sense.
Can you expand more on that, Dawn, about, because you have a very multifactorial approach. You try and build those blocks bit by bit by asking those questions and inviting the caregiver, it's almost like an assisted awareness. It's allowing them to become more aware of what's going on and how things are. And so in so doing, you're building up those blocks around the dog. Can you build on a bit more about and talk about the importance of the play, the diet, all the different factorial aspects, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I love using analogies, and something that's just popped into my head in terms of if we're driving a car, how many times we might brake or accelerate on one journey, how much we might change gear, brake, accelerate, look in our rear view mirror. You know, that will depend on the environment. It will depend on the type of car we're driving, the reason for the journey. So just a trip out, I don't know, to the shops in a car will include lots of different elements. And if someone says, well, I just want to know how to drive better, or how do I get the best use of my car, we would have to look at all those different factors. And I think one of the biggest challenges is if a caregiver has an issue, for instance, with a dog that's barking and lunging at dogs and cars, and there's lots of focus on that specific behaviour. The art, if you like, and the skill is to actively listen, but how to weave in things that are going to impact on those behaviours that may not seem at all relevant. So, for instance, we often look at, I start a lot of the time with lead and handling skills. The basics: how much sleep does your dog get? Has your dog got a quiet space to sleep in? Because if your dog is overtired or over-exercised, or the play isn't matching the dog's needs, then you're going to have a higher stress level. It's going to impact on your walks. That impacts on your relationship. And I explain it as if it's dots that we are going to join up. But if I see, for instance, someone might roll their eyes at, like, there's nothing wrong with my dog, they've been to the vet, I'm not taking my dog to the vet, there's nothing wrong with my dog, then I will park that information. I'm not going to get into a conflict or argue that, well, how, you know, I just won't do that. What I tend to do is just listen to that. And I understand that if someone's brought you in to deal with a behaviour situation and they're at their wit's end, the last thing they need to hear is that there could be something wrong with their dog as well, physically. And so we have to tread carefully, which is why I like to use video, so that it's a neutral platform. So we can say, look, if you notice there's a slightly stiff leg, and it's just an observation and bringing that in. And it does vary literally between each person. So some people, one lady that I've just worked with, she left a lovely review. She might be watching, I'm not sure. But she's lived with her dog for 5 years before getting any specific support, and embraced the whole concept of the relationship-based dog-centered approach. And it's superseded expectations. But I always under promise, over deliver. So I never say we're going to fix your dog or sort the problems out, but somebody that's open-minded, that can see that there are possibilities with their dogs and how all these different layers. Because if we look at the human parallel, if I'm overtired, stressed, I don't make good decisions, that affects other people around me. So I continuously revisit things like analogies and giving examples, but not pushing. But at the same time, as you've said, Andy, sometimes we can't sugarcoat things. And again, I think, first of all, is actively listening, but also having a lot of empathy. This person might be at their wit's end, and they just want the dog sorted out. And so it's treading that path with them, being there to sort of hold. When I see someone that's angry or upset, I think, how would I be with a dog that was displaying those behaviours? But it's easier said than done sometimes. So yeah, it's important to look at, has the dog got the basics: access to water, a decent diet, appropriate exercise for the dog, and that will literally depend on the dog. Sometimes people find it difficult if I suggest a walk-free day, for instance. So instead of going on and on and on about the benefits of having a rest and a walk-free day, there may be other things that we can prioritize and then come back to that. So it is very fluid, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I think that's really important, that fluidity. And I think I love that you said it about 3 times actually in that bit about possibilities, because that kind of phrase of assisted awareness, that's kind of what we're doing really, because invariably when we meet that client for the first time, they're very focused in on the challenges that they have, and the things that they can't do and the things that are affecting them, and giving them that chance to be able to talk about this and recognize what it is that they're actually saying through those words. It's a really important point, because then we can help to do a couple of things, can't we? We can give them other outlets for some of those things, that actually their own needs-based aspect of that, because quite often we can find that we're putting a lot of our own needs-based care onto what we do with our dog, but actually we can find that elsewhere. But also looking at the possibilities through the dog they actually have already. And I think this awareness, once their dogs are more aware, when the caregivers are more aware, it helps that process for them to almost see a different dog in front of them, and to keep connecting through. And an effective state, Scott at Effective Dog Behaviour obviously does a lot of education on kind of an effective state for the dog and the human. We all connect better through a care system.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have to be available to support that care. I think there's always a triadic relationship, isn't there? Because there's the dog, obviously, and the caregiver, but also us. And whilst we're in that process for supporting, we become part of that process, don't we? We become part of that. And we can easily, if we're not careful, get dogs doing certain things, but then find that actually the caregivers are doing things that they find uncomfortable, or things that are beyond them, because we haven't been quite aware there. So it is that juggling act between the two and finding that middle ground and building on it. And that's what those possibilities that you were talking about.
Yeah, and I think if we can listen and observe and see when someone has some resistance, or they fully embrace something, and again, like that journey, if they fully embrace that, we can accelerate. And we can enhance that. If the brakes are on and there's that hesitancy, there's a roundabout, shall I pull out, shan't I pull out? Then we can support that part of that hoop, if you like, or that barrier. Sometimes, I mean, I had a deep belief when I first was introduced to a harness and a longer length lead, that it just wasn't going to work. And there's a lovely saying, which I always get wrong, by Wayne Dyer. Like, we always say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And he says, you'll see it when you believe it. And I love that phrase, because I didn't believe that my dog would stop pulling. I didn't believe that I could free up my dogs, or free up my restraints to allow my dogs to make better choices. Because who were they to make better choices? I was the grown-up, I was the human. So I think that having that open-mindedness, having said that, this roller coaster journey that we're on as professionals, sorry, my alarm's going off. It's because I sometimes fall asleep during the day, and I have to set my alarm to think of dogs. Not every day that I sleep, of course, but yeah. So I think that sometimes it can be challenging when we get that resistance. I want you to fix my dog. I want you to just get it sorted as quickly as possible. I haven't got time to be learning all the nice fluffy stuff. But often that says more about the person and how they're struggling at the time. I was in that place myself. I was rushing around. Everything was like 100 miles an hour. And I think the pressures of life, if you've got children, you know, and all the rest that's going on in the world, is trying to make it as simple and easy as possible to see some little wins, some little nice things that we know has made a difference to the dog. And it may not yet be acknowledged consciously by a caregiver. And that's where we need to make sure we look after ourselves as well. There was another lovely saying that I posted on my personal page last night, and I will get this wrong, but it's something along the lines of we are not of less value if someone doesn't see our worth. And I think that's so important, because it's human nature to, well, I don't say human nature, it's very human to try to coerce, and this happens for dogs as well as people. So to coerce, manipulate, guilt trip, you know, all these things can go on with the dynamic of a human relationship. And so that's why I think it's really important, before we start working with somebody, that we make sure we're a good fit and that we keep that dialogue going. If we want a win-win situation, we're there to support somebody. And I just jumping around a little bit, I thought the other day, different, if I want to learn a language, I mean, I want to keep eating chocolate cake and lose tons of weight, you know, and I'm really annoyed that that just isn't happening. But I could go to a slimming club, and it's what I'm in control of. I can learn, but if I don't do that, if I went the next week and said, I think you're absolutely rubbish because I didn't eat any chocolate cake and I still weigh the same, it would be quite unreasonable to do that. Or if I was learning a language and I said to the teacher, I'm not getting this. I don't see the point of learning about the cat sat on the mat if I need to be fluent French in 3 weeks. So it's quite, I think it's quite a unique environment, and I will be corrected if I'm wrong, but it just seems to be one of those environments where the expectations are extremely high, that the demands are very high, and the rewards can be massive, but it can be a really bumpy road in terms of people perhaps blaming us because their dog hasn't been fixed, even though we'd said that the dog wouldn't be fixed. So yeah, I think we need to really make sure we take care of ourselves as well when we go through those, because people can be a little bit unreasonable sometimes as well.
I think that's the nature of it. I think this is the thing for me that I'm really interested in, looking at the two sides of the coin of behavior, you know, the behavior that we do and why we do stuff, and also why we judge the behavior in others and where that comes from, and the kind of stereotype nature of some of those judgments, the quick thinking of that, and understanding that psychology helps us when we're working with a caregiver. And like we were talking about off air, it's about us trying to be responsive to and available to all these emotional truths of another, but without feeling responsible for them. And that's really important. And as long as we're going in as a caregiver, and I know this is something that a lot of people have got in touch with me about, who want to do things with a more kind of dog-centered, emotional-centered approach. And it's something that I'll be touching on with my coursey thing, which is coming out in January. I can tell people in the group about that at another time. But because it can be difficult to navigate, you're right. And I think, you know, it's not like you and I just woke up one morning with all the answers. We've gone through a process of working stuff out, and being clear up front what you're doing. And I think for me, connecting through that emotional experience is a really good basis, because I found a lot with clients, when you really allow them, it's almost giving permission to them to slow stuff down, to ditch the expectations for the time being, and just think, right, what are we learning here? What's the dog going to tell us? The wonder of many people when they're like, wow, that was amazing. I didn't know dogs did that. I didn't know that happened. It starts to create a different dynamic in how they think about their dog now, because, you know, this comes back to the possibilities that you were talking about earlier, about them seeing different possibilities and different connections through their relationship with their dog. And it's such a wonderful process. But some people, their own life stories, they might not be in the best place, as you say. And even when I was involved in human therapy, it's not that everybody turned up through the door were necessarily in the right place at the right time to hear a message or to kind of connect to things. And that's the thing about us not being ultimately responsible for that. We can just offer what we can offer and feel that that's the authenticness that you get from Andy if you employ me, and Dawn if you employ you. And recognizing our worth, as you said earlier, you know, even though somebody else might not value it.
Yeah, I think it's partly as well connection for us. So I mean, I live on my own, I work on my own, you know, so it can be very isolated and very immersive in a case and in the world of dogs and my own dogs. And I think there's a huge benefit of having a support network around with like-minded people, because friends and family might not necessarily agree with what we're doing or understand what we're doing or even support it. In certain public social media type groups, you can end up having to justify and explain and rationalize why you work like you work. So I think it's really good to find, you know, a place that you've got a network for. Not taking responsibility is a really, really fascinating subject, and it's quite a deep one, because I struggle with that because I feel responsible, and there's a joint responsibility in terms of, and that's why contracting is so important. And again, I continue to reflect on that in terms of we will do this, and this, but it's. So the way that I work, it's based on the dog in front of us, but also each session is based on the session before. And so that can be quite challenging to market and sell to a prospective client, because we won't do week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. We will cover X, Y, and Z. What we do is throughout the program, we will cover, but we will, again, like that journey, sometimes we'll break more and sometimes we'll accelerate more. And I need to see the dog, first of all, do an observation, see that interaction with the other end of the lead and the other person or family, normally outside. And then it might be suitable for us to work with one of my own dogs alongside that dog. It might not be suitable at all or appropriate or safe. And so I think that part of the responsibility is understanding that by making those informed choices, but supporting the owner to understand, owner said that word, the caregiver to be open-minded and trust the process. And that is a big ask. If you don't know me, you know, I want to know. It's not like we're buying a car where we say, well, I've done X amount of miles, you know, X colour, it fits my profile. It is a dynamic. And I think that's where the responsibility side of things is so important, but challenging at the same time. Because I have faith that when somebody engages with me on a program, they will see changes in their dog. But I can't say what those changes will necessarily be or how long they might take. I'm helping them build a toolkit that's appropriate for their individual dog and for their circumstances, so that they've got the best chance to live the safest, best quality of life with the dog in front of them. But it's, like I say, it's not so easy, it doesn't roll off the tongue. You know, I can't say we've got a 4-week program, week 1, week 2, week 3, 4, we will do this. And at the end of it, your dog will be able to do X, Y, and Z. Now, I understand there are people that can and do say that. And so it's just having a helicopter view of those differences. I tend to work on what do we need to learn about our dogs to make our lives better with our dogs, rather than what society dictates that a dog should behave in this way. Therefore, humans must learn how to train their dogs, and they're two very sort of polar opposites often. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. If it's a difference between a country you live in where your dog has to be on a shorter lead, you're living in a city and there are bylaws, but there's always scope for giving that dog the best quality of life that the owner can open their mind up to, and let go of this really strong message that we must control our dogs and they must comply with our will.
And I think that's an important thing, isn't it? Because I can make a promise to anybody I work with, everybody, that I can guarantee they will see a different dog. But the most important word there is see, because once they understand their dog, they will see a different dog. Even if the dog doesn't change at all, they will see a different dog. And I think it is about outlook. We have to recognize, and the job is challenging, because I see us very similar to being like social services, right? In many ways, we're there. I love Kim Brophy's term of family mediator, family mediators, because we have the expectations, the emotional investment, the emotional load that the caregiver has. We also have a dog who they have their own story to tell, and it's finding that middle ground and trying to make some alignment between these things. And I think one thing that is very much misunderstood by some is that this kind of thing, thinking beyond the operant, looking at the dog centered care as though it's somehow not about training and you don't do these things. It is, but it's just starting from more of a dog centered place, about thinking about what we can do to support that. And in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, I think helping caregivers to shift what they see in front of them with their dog is hugely transformative to that process, because you can't make people see things differently. You have to invite them on that journey you're talking about and help them, that assisted awareness I talked about earlier, because a lot of the times when we think, oh, that's cruel, or that's bad, or that's whatever, those people aren't necessarily being cruel. Some people are, but most people aren't. It's just because they're not aware. They're unaware of doing that thing. That's the thing. And it's helping awareness so that people can come to their own truths about things. Quite often when we work in this way, I find, I don't know how you find it, Dawn, but I don't have to necessarily suggest management style things, because the caregiver, once they think about it, they suggest it themselves. They're like, well, actually, yeah, do you know what? I get really stressed when I go down the beach with my dog, and so does my dog. So it might be an idea to perhaps not go down the beach for a bit.
Yeah, those are magic moments of transformation, and it's more about facilitating. So I see the way that I work as facilitating that change, and they can. I mean, I had a session with a whole family, and it was so sweet because the children were really enthusiastic, and they sat with us and they were asking lots of questions, and it was fantastic. And then one of them picked up on some terminology that I'd used. I don't know if it was if you run around the garden, the dogs will get excited and go over threshold, for instance, and we did sort of little pictures and things. And then one of the children just came out and I said, right, what were you doing then? They said, oh, we ran across the garden. And I said, okay, then what might we have to think about when we do that? And they said, oh, we've got to be careful because our dog might go over a threshold or something like that. And I was just blown away. I just thought, oh, not only have they listened and picked up on it, but also have their own answers and have picked up on the words as well. And it was just so beautiful. We have a lot of really special, amazing moments, and the heaviness is always generally the bias towards what isn't working and what's going wrong for all of us. But I think that facilitating that transformation is one of the biggest gifts we can give to a caregiver and the dog, because it can be very, I mean, I felt horrendously guilty when I started to learn more about my dogs. I felt I shed many a tear over how dreadful I felt, because I'd done things that I'd been told to do by a professional. And it was, yeah, it's coming to terms with that as well. So I think, like you said, it's about supporting that journey of the caregiver, not making them feel bad. I mean, my goodness, let's be honest, it can be extremely frustrating. Yeah. But I remember when I was trying to do things like the lead skills, and I was getting in such a mess with it, and I needed someone to be kind and supportive, not judgmental. But we're not saints either, and I think that's why we need to reflect. I think that's really helpful, to reflect, share, get that support network. It's not so much about being the same, it's acknowledging differences and that being okay, because it's the human side of our professionalism that's going to support us, rather than spending energy on whether we should have done it this way or that way. It's more holistic in terms of, how do we feel about that? How do we come up with better ways? I'm always thinking about, there must be a better way to get a message across, to prevent, I mean, my why for coming into doing what I do now is to help dogs stay in the home, really, or help them to be rehomed. My why is that I know how challenging it can be to live with a dog with behaviours that we're frightened of, and so that's my why. And I think when I talk to clients, I say, if you know the why, or know more about the why, we can start to look at the what, because we all want the what. We want the right now. Yes, but what do I need to do right now? So yeah, I think, sorry, I've digressed a bit again, hopping around. But yeah, I'm always thinking there are always better ways that we can look at communicating and helping people, whether that's a program or a post on Facebook or another social media platform, planting those seeds and nurturing them, and for it to start to make sense for us with support. So if I have, for instance, I have support sometimes myself, and I don't want to be fixed. I just want someone to listen. It's irritating. So I said, well, why don't you do it like this? I just want to just talk sometimes and be heard. Sorry, that's Doogie grumbling in the background. But yeah, I think there are other important aspects to the whole picture of all the things we're trying to do to make life better and safer.
I love what you said. All that is just really awesome and really profound, actually, if we actually just think about what you were saying there, because we have to find a vocabulary to communicate to the other that makes sense to them. And I use the word invitation a lot, because we're inviting people. We're not trying to make people, we're inviting people. But also this thing about planting a seed and nurturing, because we have to work out, this is like you said, this is one of the big challenges for us as professionals, is we've got to try and allow the caregiver that space to connect to these different thoughts and messages in a way that's authentic for them. Otherwise, they're just going to start doing stuff because we've asked them to, or they're going to feel there's going to be a little bit of resistance to doing things because it doesn't feel right to them. And that's the challenge. And I think as an industry, as a community, we need more education on communication skills and also on good observational skills, not just with the dogs, but with people. And that thing about active listening, we need to listen with our eyes as much as we listen with our ears, right? When we're there in the moment. I think there's a lot of similarities also from when I think back to my human therapy days. Quite often, those around the person who needed the support, so family members, they were doing things because they felt it was the right thing to do to support them, but it actually was more about their narrative than it is about what the person needed. And
Yeah.
that's very similar to what a lot of our clients, when we meet them, they've maybe used tools, they've done methods that we might know might not help, but for them, they're just doing what they think they need to do to help and support their dog. And this is that non-judgmental thing. And I think, you know, anybody listening who's involved in human therapy will know we have to tread very carefully through the family and the social dynamics around the people that we're supporting, because even with ourselves, you know, you said earlier that, you know, we kind of get stuff wrong, but of course we do, because, you know, even with my husband, you know, I say and do things sometimes because I think I'm being helpful, but guess what? Sometimes I'm not. And we just have to allow those conversations with our clients so they think, okay, so it's okay to kind of not get it right. It's okay to recognize that it's tough being a caregiver, whether you're caring for a partner or a child or a dog. The same challenges are there.
And often it is the fact that we are caring for multiple dogs or multiple people. We have a family dynamic that could be going through a really tough time, especially, you know, after everything that's been happening and is continuing to happen. And we've got worn down, you know, we've got exhausted, and our resources, I say to people, you can only do the best you can with the resources that you have. And if you're completely knackered and you're very stressed, then with the best will in the world, we're not thinking straight. So one thing I do like to include with the programs and the behaviour work that I do is self-care for the caregivers. And it sounds a bit off or left field sometimes. And again, I have to be very careful, because it will be after I've listened and engaged and I have a rapport with somebody. And because one person's really relaxing thing to do is another person's nightmare. You know, one person might get a lot out of doing a jigsaw puzzle with 1,000 pieces of the sea and find that very therapeutic. I would take it in the garden and burn it. it wouldn't do for me. But I have found on my own journey through self-care, it's still a work in progress, that sometimes it's not the big things, it's the little things. So I find that I sort of plant again the seed. What do you like? What helps you? If you could wave a magic wand, you know, and you could just have some respite from life, have a think about what those things might be. So for me, I mean, they might be a bit weird or nerdy, I don't know, but I love nature. I find it extremely grounding. I see it more because I'm conscious of it. So I'll see a bird. My friend will say to me, what, you know, there'll be, I say, oh, look at that hawk. And she's just trying to, you know, oh God, I've got to look at the hawk because Dawn's told me to look at the hawk. And then she'll just, yeah, you know, it's just not, and we laugh about it because we're different. That's okay. But for me, nature, it might be a certain scent of something. It could be, I went to the pictures and saw, what's it called? The Marvel film. I want to call it Viper. It's
Venom?
Venom. I'm not into sci-fi at all. I saw it on the telly on a Saturday night and thought, wow, this is really good. And I had a client-free day the other week, and I went to the pictures on my own, got some popcorn, and I watched the film. And it was, apart from it was I was too loud. Turn it down, it's too loud. But yeah, so that was a massive shift and something different for me. I took myself out of my house and did something different. For me, it could go into the library, reading a book. So I try and support people to find that thing that doesn't necessarily cost any money or because just trying to relax can be stressful. If you've got to try and book an appointment or, you know, arrange it, then in and of itself, you just think it's not worth it. So I do encourage people to just to reflect and think, what little list of menu could I have of things that will help me? Because we need that. We can't, it's not sustainable to keep going and keep going and keep going.
No, and I think it's such an important part of the process, right, Dawn? I think we have to offer thoughts on giving space for the caregivers, you know, for them to look at that. And also something else you said a minute ago, and I really like it. This thing about, as part, you know, if we talk about slowing things down, of course, with observations and that, but if we allow ourselves to slow the consult process down, the support process down, and make ourselves available to ask a lot, and to seek consent from the caregiver, you know, would you feel comfortable if we did this for the time being? You know, how would you feel about doing this for the time being? So they get that chance to talk about the individual bits rather than just have a plan in front of them, where some of those component parts might be really uncomfortable for them. You know, I had a chat with Rachel Forday as part of the kind of new Ask series, and she was saying about the fact that she doesn't like to walk out in the evening because of how she feels vulnerable as an Asian lady, because of her experiences, and how when she's got a dog like Dave, a trainer or a behaviourist may well say to her, why don't you walk your dog at quiet times? Well, actually, that could be asking her to do something that actually she feels uncomfortable with. Whereas if somebody said, you know, how do you feel about, or, you know, what would that she has the opportunity to give that point of view about what isn't comfortable. And
that is so important, because some people, like, I'm not backward in coming forward. If someone asked me to do something, I'd say I don't think I could do that, or what do you mean by that? So I would seek clarification. Whereas some people don't feel comfortable, they might feel that they're challenging you or questioning you. And so one thing I say to people is, this is your dog, and you know your dog better than I do. And if there's anything that I ever suggest, that I won't intentionally suggest that it's not going to be a right fit, but if I ever suggest something that you don't feel comfortable with or you disagree with, I'm absolutely open to you letting me know or not doing it. Because just something simple like an enriching session with one dog, you know, if the dog starts to get a bit guardy or snappy, that could be a disaster for somebody else. So I wouldn't suggest it in the first place if it wasn't a good fit, but I always put a caveat in writing and verbally that if there's anything you feel uncomfortable with, please don't do it and say, I took my dog for a walk, fell over, and because you told me to, or I took my dog out at a quiet time and I got mugged, or I had a panic attack, you know. Thank you, Doogie. So yeah, it's again empowering those people, and it's not making a big thing of it. It's just say it to everybody. You know, I'm quite comfortable if you make those choices, and then we can talk about it, or you can just say, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. You know, that's fine.
Actually, if you start the process by this is my way of working. Everybody finds their own way, but I always try and invite the caregiver at the beginning of the process, because I've already got the history form, so I know all the kind of staley stuff, and I can be, okay, how does this make you feel? What's your story? What's your outlook? I'm already starting the relationship off with giving them the chance to talk and to express themselves, and asking those questions. How do you feel about this at this point in their journey? How do you feel about that? They're more likely then to say stuff to you. I think this is really important. It's very easy as a professional to turn up with the view already about how this is going to look and what we're going to do, and have that very task-orientated approach. Where when we foster more of a care-orientated approach, which might have tasks in it, again, it's not absolutism. It's not. There's no tasks involved. Yeah. But having that care, starting with our relationship with the caregiver, that underpins that, it allows more room for discussion, and candid ones. You know, sometimes some of those discussions are difficult, actually, but we need to foster that relationship from the start. Otherwise, it's such a big cliff to jump off when those conversations suddenly change halfway through that relationship. It's difficult. It's more difficult.
It is, and I think that it can be also very overwhelming and a bit scary if you open up that conversation. In your mind, you might be thinking, why did I do that? Because now you might feel a bit out of control, that it might go off on a tangent. and in our heads we're thinking, right, I've been hired by this person to work with their dog and them about X, Y, and Z. And if I ask too many open questions, or it starts, how do I deal with that? And I think that's another subject for another day, because we're coming to the end. But I think it's a very important aspect of how we manage how we feel when we so that we can be more open. And it's okay to say, I don't know at the moment, I want to think about that. So for instance, when after a session with a client that's been practical, I want to go away and I will reflect on what I've seen and done during that session. I'll reflect on how it went with the caregiver and their dog. And I will then thread in things that we may not have covered during the session, that they are useful resources that will support them, whether that's self-care or a video clip of, you know, some body language. So I don't feel the pressure, which I did when I first started. I felt I had to know all the answers and I had to tell them right now. And because sometimes we get fired loads of questions. Why this? Why that? Why is my dog doing this? I mean, just a practical on-lead session where we want to be quiet and observe. And why is my dog sniffed? And why does my dog do this? And we're trying to listen, and we're trying to look, and we're trying to teach, and we're trying to be calm. And so it's getting to the stage where we feel comfortable enough to know that it's okay not to know, that we can say to them, let me just hold on to that thought for a little bit. I'll come back to you on that. So yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, that's a big discussion on its own. And but we're available to other people's stories in many areas of our lives. And you know, this is the thing about the kind of professional aspect of it. We know why we're there. We can hear about other things, and we can take out what we think is relevant to what we're looking at doing. And you know, you said earlier, sometimes I don't want answers, I just want to be heard. And giving the caregiver a chance to talk about stuff, we shouldn't fear it too much, because they're going to tell us a lot of stuff if they want to. It's an invitation, it's not. And people do open up about a lot of things, because quite often their relationship with their dog especially is part of that challenge for us, is to unpick how much of that relationship is overweighted because of what the dog comes to represent to them,
Yeah,
regarding
absolutely.
other parts of their lives.
Absolutely. And it's a very sensitive situation if that dog means that massive something to that person, and they're going to be more delicate around that. You know, it might be obvious to us that somebody needs to change something or do something or stop doing something. But again, I always say, every time we come up with a solution, we must be aware of the consequences of that possibility. So it might be, as you said, suggest walking out of normal hours, but the consequence could be a stress for the dog and or the caregiver. So it is important to look at that whole picture and have those little caveats in place, I think, for everybody to. And you can see if someone tenses up, or if they suddenly are horrified at the thought of a dog having a day off, then that's okay. You know, we can come back to that. If that's going to stress you and your dog out. I mean, I don't want them to have a day off walking a dog and the dog eats the sofa. You know, unrelated completely, but I'm certainly likely to get the blame for that if that's something I suggested. So if they feel so stressed that they can't have their dog have a day off yet, but gradually, usually after a few sessions, again, it's try it, but set the dog up and yourselves for success. Don't choose the optimum time and place to do that. So yeah, possibilities are wonderful.
And that's what Dawn actually, that's what Emma was saying in the last chat about not looking for compliance, but looking for collaboration. And that's just working through that. And I think One thing I ask my clients to do is when we do our kind of coaching walks, whatever, is to send me a little reflective account. So they do that in their own time, you know, just about how did they feel about that session? What did they observe? What did they take away from it? What was challenging? And it's really good reflective accounts because it gives us an idea about how they learn, about what they put weight onto, what they add value to. So that can really help us when we start thinking about what we need to think about next time, because we've done our observations with the dog on that coaching walk. So we have an idea of, you know, where the dog is. And of course, when we start the next coaching walk, we have to check in with the dog today because they, you know, affective state is really important. We've got to see what mood they're in. But also we can learn a lot from reflective accounts. And if any of our colleagues don't do that, I think it's something to trial with especially those clients that that you feel need that extra support. It gives you an opportunity for them each time just to write a little reflective plan. And what I find interesting even there is some people will write literally pages, and they obviously needed to express that. Other people, they might just do a few bullet points. But again, it gives them that chance to kind of connect it. Right, we're well over time. I thought we might do Dawn, it's always many. So any closing points really about that you'd like to share with us, and also let everybody know how they can find out more about you and what you do?
Okay, yeah, no, first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. I've really enjoyed it, and I knew it would just happen. No script, just free flowing. I would say for caregivers and professionals to basically just have a consideration of how you feel yourselves and how you feel yourselves. That sounds funny, but yeah, how you're feeling, what it is that's going on, and be kind to yourselves. I think one of the biggest takeaways: be kind to yourselves, whether you're a professional or caregiver, or most of us are both. Just be kind to yourself. Factor in that support network. And factor in a little bit of self-care, whatever your self-care calling is, and communicate, I would say. And for me, I'm at www.forpositivepaws.co.uk. That's FOUR, the word positive, PAWS.co.uk. And I've got my Facebook page, which is For Positive Paws. I love writing. I'm very inspired, and it's not often planned. I just hear something, see something, and away I go. But it's generally about dog-centered care and reactivity, and the owner care as well. So yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking to you.
I really appreciate it, Dawn, and make sure you pop those links in the comment section on this chat, and then make sure you share your work with us in the group for sure.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you.
And maybe in the new year we could get you back so we can explore a little bit more about the self-care side of things. So I think that's really important. And we have to recognize whether you're a caregiver or a professional who supports a caregiver, how much this process takes out of you actually. And because being available, as I know I keep using that term, but it's hard being available. That's why it's not very easy to be that, because we tend to just kind of, it's a lot easier to not be. And we have to find those ways to recharge our own batteries a little bit and give ourselves the emotional space that we need.
Absolutely, yeah, because otherwise we can't carry on, and it's tough being self-employed, or even if you're doing it part and part with employed, self-employed, looking after a dog. I mean, my dog's, one's 13 and a half, one's 12 and a half. They're getting health issues, and I feel guilty because it's stressing me out, and that's not their fault. They're poorly. They're needing extra care. They're at another life development stage, which has landed on us all. We knew they were going to get old. I've lost dogs when they've got about 10 due to cancer. So having dogs that are getting into old age and are aging, so that's another stressor, if you like, for all of us. And then needing to go out to the toilet more, or doing strange things, and yeah, it's a learning curve. But I can only be there for them if I'm there for myself a bit as well. So I am a work in progress.
I love that, because we all are, right? And I think that's really important. And we've used the word reflection a lot today, and I think we have to allow ourselves a chance that period of reflection. We all had that kind of thrust on us with lockdowns and things, but we shouldn't have to wait for big world pandemics to actually be reflective. We can just think, right, how do I look at that? And something you just said there as well about, I know we're supposed to finish, but it's an important point. I think it's recognizing what we are perceiving we lose. So when our dogs get to a certain age, there's already an element of anticipatory grief there. But even when we think about our clients, there is a grief there. There's a loss there about, hang on, when they realize, we talked about that assisted awareness, when they become more aware that actually the dog they had in their mind isn't that dog is not there. It's a different dog, it's a different expectation, it's a different realization. That is a kind of a grieving process there, because there is an element of loss, the loss of, okay, that might not have been a reality, but it was their reality for quite a long time.
You know, that is a really important point, Andy, and I think that kind of pulls everything in together in terms of responsibility as well, because it's devastating for somebody if they're in a situation where they never thought they would be. That is devastating to people, and it's not easy to work through that. So you've got a safe dog, or to rehome the dog. You know, the stress of that is horrendous. I've been through it a couple of times myself, so I've walked in those shoes, and that's where we can feel quite responsible, because how do we support the owner in that situation? Because it's a long haul, it's not a quick fix, you know, especially if there's children involved. That is an emotional roller coaster. So absolutely, it's devastating. How we deal with that non-judgmentally. It might not be the right dog in the right home. Can we support them on a rehome? We've got to be very, very careful with our own responsibilities and our own insurance and our professionalism. So yeah, loads of other stuff that's there to be talked about.
Lots of stuff. And you know, I think what I'm loving about all these Facebook Lives over time is there's a bit of truth in every single chat that I've had that add into this pot that we can all draw from about these things. And a lot of stuff that Emma and Lee was talking about last time regarding that part of the process was really helpful. So thank you, Dawn. We're well over time. Thank you everybody for watching. We've got Hannah Capon next Thursday, the 4th of November in the evening. Hannah Capon, who is the kind of the visionary behind CAMS, Canine Arthritic Management. It's going to be a really good one. I've got some exciting guests for everybody coming up in December. Not going to tell you who, we've got a couple, so it's a nice little early Christmas present for everybody. But keep an eye on the main group. Thank you, Dawn, so much to today. I'll get this up on YouTube very soon. And yeah, everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. Nice to see you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.